Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the entire congregation, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. I am Nancy Tickner, and I'll be your worship associate for today's service. We gather together with our doubts as well as our convictions, our fears and our hopes, with our failures and our aspirations, with our sorrows and our joys. Whether you are joining us for the first time or you've been a member and a friend for many years, we are glad you are here. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, whatever your background, whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived here, you are welcome. Our speaker today is UUCSV member Reverend Henry Tickner, whose message for the service is "To understand is to forgive." Henry served as the first called minister of our church from 2003 to 2010. He earned a Master's of Divinity degree from Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C., and was ordained in 2003. In 2018, UUCSV's congregation voted to recognize his service to the church by naming him Minister Emeritus. Prior to entering the ministry, Henry spent 32 years in elementary and secondary education as a teacher, an elementary and middle school principal, and central office administrator. He lives in Winchester with me, his wife, and has 2 wonderful adult daughters, 2 terrific sons-in-law, and 2 precious grandsons. Our opening words this morning are from our UU Association's worship web. I'd first just like to say that although we are not physically together in this place of sanctuary, I hope you will be able to feel that the here in this reading can represent both our beloved church community and wherever you are at this time. You are also welcome to join me in saying this phrase that repeats after every new line. Here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. A Place to Forgive and to be Forgiven by Kathy Cartwright Chow. For those we have hurt in any way, whether through words or deeds or thoughts, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For the excuses we have made just to be right, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For the blame we have placed on someone else again and again, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For passing up the opportunity to help because we were afraid, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For hiding the truth from someone, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For working beyond the anger and resentment, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. For the times I have not felt heard, here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. Forgiveness is never easy, whether for yourself or someone else. Here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. And now, as Robert Hurt comes forward, let us all say together from our homes the words for lighting our chalice. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek to sustain and to share. And I invite you to join with me now as we say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help our neighbor. To these ends, we covenant one with another.
As become the custom of our congregation in these difficult days, let us join together in a moment of silence as we hold in our hearts our nation and the world, all those who are struggling and suffering from the COVID-19 pandemic and the systemic racial injustice suffered by so many, and all the challenges that we all must face. May it be so.
Good morning. Our story today is about memories. I'd like you to meet my friend, Betty Bear. One day, Betty Bear asked her Grandma Bear, "What is a memory?" "Everyone's talking about it, especially about memories of Grandpa Bear since he died. Is memory something you can buy at the store? Is memory something that's on the shelf in the back of the pantry? Is memory something I can put in my backpack? Is memory something that you have to be old to have? Can I have a memory? Said Betty Bear. And Grandma Bear said, "Oh, Betty Bear, you can have memories. What do you remember about Grandpa Bear?" Well, Betty Bear smiled and she said, "I remember his laugh. He really could shake those trees when he laughed. I remember walking in the woods with him when he showed me what berries to eat. I remember especially about the honeybees. It was fun discovering them flying around their hive. I remember he was sad when they flew away from their hive looking for a new home. I remember his wooden cane, the branch he took from the forest and carved for walking. I remember the girl, Goldie. She came into your house and she ate your breakfast. That was so funny." Grandma Bear smiled and said, "Betty Bear, all those rememberings are memories. Everyone has memories, you know, but you can't buy them or put them on a shelf." Grandma Bear went on to explain, "Now it's important to know where memories are stored. Your memories are stored in a special place of love, in your heart." Betty Bear explained, "You mean I have had memories all this time, and Ma Bear and Pa Bear and my friends and everyone all have memories right there in their hearts?" Grandma Bear said, "Yes, yes, yes. Now let's pretend. We could fill a red balloon with your memories of Grandpa Bear and tie it with a ribbon. And when you remember Grandpa Bear, you will have a full balloon full of memories." So we're going to write memories on here. These will be just your memories for you to hold. We're going to tie them around your wrist. And in that way, in your thinking and in your heart, you can pull on this balloon, and there will be your memories right back at you. Remember, Grandpa Bear will always be with you in his memories, in your memories of him.
My sermon this morning draws on a text from the Christian Bible, the Epistle to the Ephesians. Its authorship is generally attributed to the Apostle Paul. In chapter 4, verses 31 to 32, Paul writes the following: "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil be put away from you, and be ye kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God has forgiven you." This morning, I want to share with you 3 stories. The first 2 are factual, and they involve people that I am close to. Each is told with the permission of those involved, and as you will hear, they have very different endings. The third story is an ancient Zen tale which brings together the first two. So story number one. During my time as a middle school principal, a colleague of mine suffered a tragic loss. His sister-in-law and his niece resided in upstate New York. One morning, his sister-in-law's estranged husband murdered her. She was killed in the family kitchen just minutes after my friend's niece had gotten on her school bus. Neighbors who heard the shot was able to identify the killer, and at trial he was found guilty with extenuating circumstances. He was found to be insane at the time of the murder. According to the conditions set at his man's sentencing, he would be eligible for parole after serving 12 years in a psychiatric facility. My friend told me that his family will never be free from the anguish that this man has caused. Every year that the killer has gone before his parole board, my friend, his wife, and their niece have traveled to New York to witness to their belief that this man should never be granted parole. And to this day, I believe that they refuse to forgive the killer for what he did to their family. My friend has said that there are actions in this world that can never be forgiven. And those of us who have not been fully touched by the anger, the devastation, the suffering of a tragic act can never, ever speak for those who have. So why is forgiveness so hard? If forgiveness is to happen, said one of my seminary professors, Thomas Long, one must put aside the need for power, the power of being right, the power to punish someone for the pain inflicted, the power of revenge. When the injury is as painful as it was for my colleague, why should he ever be expected to forgive? And why shouldn't the person who so wronged his family be punished? Why shouldn't the perpetrators have to suffer as the victims suffered? No doubt, we are all familiar with the concept of an eye for an eye. Most world religions have concepts and teachings on forgiveness. The concept of what constitutes forgiveness may differ, but most still call for love and a pure heart. According to Judaism, if a person causes harm, he or she needs to sincerely apologize. Then the wronged person is religiously bound to forgive. However, even without an apology, forgiveness is considered a pious act. But Judaism also acknowledges a harsher definition. In the Hebrew Bible book of the Exodus, it states, "But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth," and so on. At the end of September, Jews around the world observe Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when Jews are encouraged to make amends, to ask for forgiveness for sins committed during the previous year. In Christianity, forgiveness plays an important role in the spiritual life of all believers. These familiar words from the Lord's Prayer are but one example. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And of course, there is the parable of the prodigal son, whose father lifts up forgiveness for his wayward son. And probably the ultimate act of forgiveness in Christianity occurs when Jesus cries out from the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Islam is partly derived from the Semitic word salam, which signifies peace. In Islam, forgiveness is a prerequisite to genuine peace. Forgiveness is held as the preferred act whenever possible. It is described in the Quran as those who pardon and maintain righteousness are rewarded by God. He does not love the unjust. Of course, in Islam, as in Judaism, there is too a strong eye for an eye aspect, overshadowing forgiveness and informing revenge. In Buddhism, forgiveness is seen as a practice to prevent harmful emotions from disturbing one's mental well-being. The Buddhist concept of karma teaches that it is preferable to offer forgiveness than to seek revenge, for the wrongdoer is indeed the most unfortunate of all. Buddhism's emphasis on the concepts of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and the equality of all beings is intended as a means to avoid resentments. And so now I come to my second story. Late in the summer of 1989, my cousin John and his wife Peg were in the process of renovating a home which had been in the family since the mid-1800s. While they were able to do much of the work themselves, there were certain jobs that they hired contractors to complete. One such job was the rewiring of the old house. And for this project, they hired a journeyman electrician. During each morning, during the time the electrical work was being done, John would go off to his job with the Maine State Department of Mental Health, leaving Peg and his two very young children to fill their days as they wished. But at some point in the process, my cousin decided that the electrical work was not being done satisfactorily, and he dismissed the man from the project. Early one morning, a couple of weeks later, the electrician knocked on the front door of the house and asked to talk to John. As my cousin came to the door, the man took out a pistol and ordered the family into the basement. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, the electrician slugged my cousin in the head with the butt of his pistol, causing him to lose consciousness. And he gagged and bound John's limp body to a pillar. He next ordered Peg and the two children to go back upstairs and to get into the front seat of the family car, and he drove them off to an isolated logging road where he shot Peg to death, ran from the scene, leaving the two children in the car with their deceased mother. A few hours later, he turned himself in to the local police and admitted to committing this random act of incomprehensible violence. When the sentencing phase of his wife's killer's trial began, John asked the court to consider the circumstances in the killer's life. He was described as a loner, as a misfit in society. And during the trial, it became clear that the man had become infatuated with the kindness that Peg had shown him. And his rationale for the killing was simple. If she couldn't be his woman, she wouldn't be anyone's woman. Maine is not a capital punishment state. Yet in the small town, there was a clamor for revenge, for an eye for an eye. If the man couldn't be executed, at the very least, he needed to be incarcerated for life with no hope of parole. But interestingly, my cousin disagreed. He spoke in court He spoke to the judge saying, "This man doesn't need jail. He needs mental health services. People do what they do because of who they are, what has happened to them in their lives. Isn't it better," he said, "to honor the death of a loved one, not with another killing, but rather with an act that honors the memories of the victim?" John believed this so much that he had Peg's gravestone engraved with these words: "To understand is to forgive." Genuine forgiveness takes time. Some would say there are not enough days in a lifetime for all that pain to heal. So true forgiveness is indeed rare. I think my former colleague showed the more understandable response, and that my cousin is clearly the exception. We would certainly have understood if my cousin too had asked, "Why should I ever forgive?" I don't know if under similar circumstances I could be so forgiving. I hope I would. I just don't know. Would I have the inner strength to try and understand so I could have the courage to forgive? I really don't know. What I do know, though, is that I want my actions to be informed by a clear understanding of what it means to forgive, and not to give in to easy judgments and quick revenge. I was struck in the October 4th service when Leslie Blackburn shared these words by the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr. "Therefore, we are saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness." Now, my third and last story is one that many of you may have already heard. One day, two monks were traveling from one village to the next. The first monk was a wise teacher, and his companion, his young student. After they had traveled for several miles, they came to a river that was overflowing its banks, and the current was very fast after many days of rain. The two monks overheard a small group of people discussing how they might cross the river, and the old monk approached them to see if he could be of any help. "I need to cross the river," said a young woman. "My father, who is gravely ill, lives in a village on the other side of the river, and I must bring him medicine, but the current is too strong for me to cross." And without thought, the elder monk said, "I will carry you to the other side." When his student heard this, he questioned his teacher angrily. "We have made a vow not to have any physical contact with women." And the student abruptly crossed the river by himself. The elderly monk placed the young woman and her bag of medicine upon his shoulders, and they too were able to cross the river to the other side, where the young woman thanked the old monk for his kindness and went on her way to her father's house. The elder monk and his student continued on their journey. After walking for many hours, the student stopped and said to his teacher, "How could you have carried that woman across the river? It's against our vows, and you know that well, and you've put our standing as monks at risk." The wise teacher looked at his young companion and said, "I put that woman down way back at the river crossing, but I see you are still carrying her." And so I ask again, why is forgiveness so hard? Probably because it draws on so many emotions all at once: anger, fear, hatred, the desire for revenge, and each person's sense of justice. What would it take for more of us to embrace the words my cousin engraved on the gravestone? To understand is to forgive. And I must confess, I have no easy answers. And as I was writing this sermon, I wondered, who in my life have I had to forgive? Most of the slights and injuries that I have sustained are superficial compared to those of my colleague and my cousin. But the more I reflect, I realized I do have a story to tell. All candidates for the Unitarian Universalist ministry must complete an in-depth psychological assessment. My birth order as the youngest in a family of 5 was a major part of this conversation. I was describing to the assessor how I had felt demeaned and belittled by teachers, by my parents, for my poor performance in school. I didn't live up to anyone's expectations. I was then asked by this person if I had seen enough success in my adult life to think of myself as a capable and competent human being. And I instantly realized that the answer to that question was no. In fact, I couldn't even repeat the words capable and competent. And I was given the assignment to explore further where this feeling came from and why it was so difficult for me to forgive even myself. And I came to realize that I had absorbed so many negative comments at school and home, and that as I matured and went out into the world, I didn't think of myself in those terms as being capable and competent. So over the next few years, I started to give myself permission to forgive myself for not following my parents' prescribed path for success in this life. And in spite of all my teachers' dire warnings and the lack of support I received, I had, in fact, enjoyed a very successful career as an educator, and I was looking forward to my new career in ministry. Slowly, ever so slowly, I began to forgive those who had broken down my self-esteem, and I realized that I would also have to start to forgive myself for all my negative feelings, for doubting my abilities for so many years. And mostly, I have. Occasionally, still, the stray bit of doubt begins to creep into my thinking, but now I can remind myself in no uncertain terms that, in fact, I am a capable and competent person. Whether it is forgiving others or forgiving ourselves, the way will never be easy. The need to be right and the desire to punish within us is strong. But stronger yet is the power of love, of understanding, and ultimately of forgiving. Indeed, it is my wish that at some point in every day, we will each be able to say to ourselves, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." Amen.
Thank you, Elaine, for your beautiful playing today. As Robert extinguishes the flame, let us say together from our homes the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
Our closing words this morning are from the writing of Amanda Udis Kessler. It may be the hardest thing we will ever do, caught up in our self-righteousness, honoring our pain. The one who offended may not deserve forgiveness, and we are not obliged to offer it. Why then should we forgive? Because we have caused pain, because we all miss the mark, because we can deepen our souls if we forgive, because restoring even one relationship heals many hearts, because we would be forgiven ourselves, because drawing closer to one another builds our communities, because the alternative is endless bitterness, because the world we seek to create is filled with forgiveness, because we need not remain caught up in our self-righteousness and pain. It may be the hardest thing we will ever do. Let us take the first step together now.
The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We hope that you will consider making an offering after today's service through our webpage, uushenandoah.org, which allows us to exercise that generosity of spirit for this self-supporting church and its many ministries, which continue while we are not able to be physically together. And we invite you to join our church community at noon for our virtual post-service gathering for joys and concerns, followed by our coffee hour conversations in smaller breakout rooms. The Zoom link is found in your UUCSV email. Thank you for joining us today.
And our benediction comes from the writings of the Sufi poet Rumi. Out beyond the ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. Amen and blessed be. Have a great week.